Greetings and welcome to another film review. This one is one of my favorite war films of all time, Apocalypse Now by Francis Ford Coppola, released, should I say, in 1979. Now, war films in general are quite formulaic, but this one breaks all the rules. This is such a unique vision of war. It can best be described almost as a napalm drenched nightmare. It's kind of in a way similar to Terrence Malick's Thin Red Line, also a brilliant war film, in the sense that it kind of is almost metaphysical and poetic in its visuals and in its structure and in its kind of engaging of the war narrative. The genius of the piece was that Francis Ford Coppola took the Joseph Conrad novel from 1899, Heart of Darkness, and transposed it to Vietnam in the late 60s. Now, this was the brainchild of John Milius, the screenwriter stroke director, who had this kind of vision from the late 60s to do this, but couldn't quite get it right. Eventually approached George Lucas to direct, interestingly enough. Coppola was not going to direct, he was just going to produce and write it with Milius. But when Lucas became unavailable because of Star Wars, Coppola just decided to direct it himself. And he does an absolutely brilliant job with this movie. It's a piece of art, apart from being just a film or a story. It's a piece of art, visually, sound. It is quite seminal. The opening scene is one of the greatest opening scenes of all time in a movie. You see this kind of set of palm trees, and you hear the of the helicopters. The rungs of the helicopter come past, stirring up the dust, so the image of the palm trees is just kind of slowly obliterated in the dust. Then the rungs come back, and slowly you hear the Jim Morrison's "This Is the End" from the Doors spring up, and this entire forest just is obliterated in this ball of napalm. And in this burning hell, you see suddenly two eyes transposed onto the visuals, and this is Martin Sheen's face, and it's upside down, so you just have this weird image of these upside down eyes. And then as the visuals go past, the head slowly rotates, and it's kind of like this multi layered image, and it's so powerful and so kind of a forerunner of what one can expect from this movie. It's a brilliant opening sequence, honestly one of the greatest in cinema. And from then we are introduced to Captain Willard, played by Martin Sheen, who's kind of had this napalm-drenched nightmare. And he's kind of still in Saigon, and he gets given a mission to go and assassinate a renegade colonel who has apparently crossed the border into Cambodia and is clinically insane, apparently, and is just doing his own thing and needs to be neutralized. And so Colonel Willard takes this job on and assembles a team around him, and they slowly snake through the river up into Cambodia, and it's a journey into the heart of darkness. So the further they get along the river, they're going deep into their own psychosis, deeper into their own madness, deeper into the evil side of their own nature, deeper into the darkness, deeper. And this film is really like a psychological study of warfare and really on human nature. It's a really profound study on human nature and how each of the people unravel. And you kind of have to ask yourself at the end of the day, who is the real madman? Is it Kurtz, or is it is it the soldiers? Is it the war? Is it the madness of war? The film poses so many different questions, and it's really like kind of looking into the mirror, looking into one's own darkness. And there's always a saying, but for the grace of God go I. And it's every human being is capable of terrible acts, as we've seen witnessed throughout history. and this film is a real kind of expose of that. And it's difficult to describe the film, so I'm not really even going to go into it. For those of you who haven't seen it, go and see the movie. Try and see it on as big a screen as possible, because it is a visual masterpiece. Vittorio Storaro won the Oscar for Best Cinematography. The sound by Walter Murch and several other people was also given an Oscar. The film should have won actually far more Oscars. Usual story. I think it lost to Kramer versus Kramer, which is kind of like Oscar bait, sentimental. And this was really a bravura piece of filmmaking that deserved more. Ironically, in fact, Francis Ford Coppola won both the BAFTA and the Golden Globe for Best Director, but not the Oscar. Interesting. And the film even won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, so it really should have been awarded more Oscars. But it stands the test of time. It's actually on several lists as I think it's in Sight and Sound is listed as the 14th greatest movie of all time. It's in Robert Ebert's top 10 films of all time. It's in the AFI top 100. It really is a fantastic movie, but be warned, it's not for the faint-hearted. It's a very, very dark movie. And this is even witnessed in the making of the film. It was supposed to take, I think, something like 6 weeks. It took 16 months. There were sets destroyed by hurricanes. They went over schedule, over budget. Francis Ford Coppola took 3 years to edit the film. He had over 200 minutes. No, not 200 minutes. Sorry. I think something like 200 hours of film that he had to edit down. Just an insane project. I mean, shot in the Philippines. They were warned not to. The Philippine army was engaged in fighting with rebels. So the scenes with the helicopters, often the local army would come and say, we need these helicopters to fight the rebels. So that was another factor that caused delays in the film. Marlon Brando arrived on the set late and overweight. He hadn't read the book. He didn't know the lines. It was an absolute disaster. Coppola eventually took the genius decision of actually shooting Brando virtually in darkness and to hide his blubber, and just using sort of brilliant lighting to just light part of his face, light the top of his head, and it works brilliantly. Brando apparently improvised something like 18-minute speeches, improvised dialogue. Only snatches of it occur in the film, but apparently it was brilliant. And it is a brilliant performance by Brando, despite the fact that he was underprepared and difficult to work with. His genius still shines through. Martin Sheen had a heart attack on the set, the lead actor. They had to hide this fact from the studio. Crazy, crazy stuff. There's a sequence in which Martin Sheen in a hotel room sort of unravels, and it goes into this crazy dance and eventually punches a mirror. That scene was completely improvised. It was his birthday. The crew got him drunk, and they just let the cameras roll on his own personal trauma because he was fighting alcoholism at the time. So a lot of boundaries crossed. There's also a notorious scene where a wild bull is, or I think it was can't think of the exact animal, was slaughtered by the local villagers, and this is juxtaposed with Willard killing Kurtz, and a human rights and animal rights activist would go absolutely crazy. But unfortunately, it was shot in the Philippines where the same laws didn't apply, and this was a local custom. Coppola simply filmed it, but still, it is an incredibly disturbing image. There are so many bravura sequences. I've mentioned the opening sequence, the sequence with where the helicopters attack a village to the strains of Wagner, The Ride of the Valkyries, is also an absolutely brilliant sequence. Brilliantly shot, brilliantly edited, everything about it, the directorial choices. Apparently there was so much footage of this scene alone, it took Walter Murch an entire year to edit just that scene. There's so many great scenes. There's scenes where they get further into the river, into the heart of darkness. There's arbitrary scenes, supposedly arbitrary, where people are just going crazy and shooting off flares. Playboy girls flown in and then stranded, while performing for the troops. It captures the absolute insanity of war. Nothing makes sense. So the narrative is jumbled, but it fits with the subject matter. It really, really is a bravura piece of filmmaking. I mean, most of the actors were high. Sam Bottoms was on LSD, speed, and marijuana during the shoot. Dennis Hopper, totally high when he does his scenes. Nobody can deliver dialogue that quickly under normal circumstances. So kind of like Jaws, all these things that should have sunk the film. I mean, that went over budget to the tune of $31 million, which in 1979 is a huge amount of money, but it grossed $150 million in the end. So an absolute masterpiece. Try and watch it on a big screen. So many great performances. Martin Sheen, I mean, originally Harvey Keitel was cast, but after 2 weeks of filming was fired. I can't imagine anyone other than Martin Sheen in the role, even though it almost killed him, literally. Brando, I mentioned, absolutely brilliant. Another great performance that I haven't mentioned, Robert Duvall as, I think his character's name was Colonel Kilgore, this crazy guy who orders people after bombing the village. The bombs have stirred up waves in the sort of local paddies, and he's forcing his men to go out and surf. I mean, it's absolutely captures the insanity of war, throwing playing cards on the Vietnam corpses. Of course, his is one of the most famous lines in the film. I love the smell of napalm in the morning. And Brando, of course, his famous line is also improvised, where he says to Willard, "You're just an errand boy sent by grocery clerks to collect the bill." So much kind of crazy stuff that wasn't in the script that is added and just works absolutely brilliantly. Try and watch the accompanying documentary Heart of Darkness about the making of the film, and you'll see there are even more stories that I can't go into detail now about the making of the film and what a nightmare it was. Absolutely brilliant documentary called The Heart of Darkness. So that's it from me. Go and watch this film, one of the great war films of all time, one of the greatest films of all time, and another testament to Coppola's genius.